There have been a lot of terrifying prehistoric beasts that have roamed the North American continent for a very long time, such as the saber-toothed tiger, dire wolf, and even the American lion. But nothing compares to the gigantic, savage prehistoric bears of our past. And one such specimen of this prehistoric bear would be what you call the short-faced bear. And a lot of researchers and scientists say that this specific specimen of prehistoric bear went extinct, vanished over 11,000 years ago on the North American continent. However, there is a whole lot of contradicting evidence and eyewitness accounts that say it is a strong possibility that this particular specimen of prehistoric bear could have survived into modern day times. But first, before we get into these fascinating accounts of the possible short faced bear, let's go ahead and take a look at some interesting statistics regarding bears. So, this short faced bear would have stood over 12 feet tall. Now, let's go ahead and compare that with the largest bear species on Earth, and that's the polar bear. So, the polar bear stands around 10 feet tall. Then, of course, the grizzly bear stands around 9 feet tall. And the largest ever recorded specimen of the polar bear weighed around 2,200 pounds. Then, of course, the short-faced bear reached up a weight of 2,500 pounds. So there's definitely some major differences in regards to the body size, weight, and composition of modern-day bear species, and then also these prehistoric bear species too as well. Then also something that you also want to consider too as well is that the legs of the short-faced bear were much larger and longer than modern day bear species, which means they were a lot faster and they were able to reach speeds up to 40 miles per hour. So that's definitely a very terrifying thing to see a gigantic bear being able to run at such a high speed. It must have been very terrifying for our prehistoric humans and ancestors. So let's go ahead and jump into this first account of a fascinating sighting of a possible prehistoric bear, the one that you call the short-faced bear. This is basically going to be what you call the Bergman Bear. So, within this isolated part of Russia called the Kamchatka Peninsula, a lot of the local villagers and researchers and scientists report seeing a bear of massive proportions, much larger than any known bear species, whether it be brown bear, grizzly bear, or polar bear. They've actually gave this specific bear a name, and it's called the god bear. Not only is the size of gigantic proportions, but the morphology and body composition of this bear does not match any known bear species that's ever been observed, from polar bears, grizzly bears, or even the hybrid species. So back in 1920, zoologist Stan Bergman was on an expedition when he found a pellet, and upon examination of this pellet, he said it had to have come from a new species of bear, either a new species of bear altogether or a subspecies. And he said it could have been a strong possibility that this might have came from the extinct short-faced bear. However, his theory was met with a lot of criticism due to the fact that mainstream scientists and biologists say that the short-faced bear only lived and thrived on the North American continent. It would have been impossible for this bear to have made it to Russia, to the Asian continent. However, there is a perspective that a lot of people tend to forget, and that's the fact that they could have crossed over through the Barren Land Bridge during the last ice age. So that is a strong possibility. And what's even more interesting too as well is that there's been accounts that this particular area of the wilderness has been closed off by the military. So definitely some strange coincidence, evidence, and accounts that say, hey, there is a possibility that the short-faced bear could still exist today in Russia. So let's go ahead and get to the second account of this mysterious short-faced bear. That's going to be what you call the McFarland Bear. So back in 1854, a group of Inuit hunters shot a gigantic yellow-furred bear. It was of enormous proportions. They had no idea what it was. And these are people that are very familiar with the wildlife of the area. They spent their whole lives there. So they sent this specimen to a biologist called Robert McFarland. He examined the specimen, had no idea what it was. So he sent the skull and a few other parts to the Smithsonian Museum. And basically, it kind of sat around at this museum until 1911, when scientists finally decided it was time to examine this strange bear specimen. And upon examination, they saw that the skin did not match a polar bear skin. And also, it was noted that it was killed out of brown bear range. So, wherever this unknown specimen was found, it's an area where brown bears are not really found too as well. And then the most shocking part of this unknown specimen was the teeth formation. So due to the formation of the teeth, they said it had to be some type of maybe a new bear species altogether, or possibly a subspecies, or they said it could have been most likely the short-faced bear. So definitely some very interesting accounts. Two accounts, the first one from Stan Bergman in Russia, and then also the second account from Robert McFarland. So, and then also, let's go ahead and jump into some very fascinating accounts that happened in Alaska. Alaska is a vast place with a lot of areas that have never been seen or explored by man. If there was any area in the world where an extinct or unknown species of animal could thrive and not be detected by humans, it would be Alaska. So, back in 1954, a fisherman in Alaska was coming home from a long day on the ocean on his boat. Basically, he was trying to outrun a storm. So, basically, he got to this island, to this coastal island, looking for a sanctuary to rest his head for the night. And he ran upon this island called the Hinchinbrook Island in Alaska. So he docked his boat on the shore, and it had all of the signs of a bustling live village. It had an active fire, had things kind of like sitting around. Like basically, it looked like a bunch of people just evacuated or got out of there as quickly as possible for no reason. And as he was exploring this abandoned village with an active fire and everything so lively, but no one there, he saw a gigantic bear. Okay, a bear of unheard of proportions. And a lot of people say that this is an actual story that has been passed down within the Alaskan culture and heritage. And after this particular incident, a group of explorers went to examine this village to try and find some evidence as far as exactly what happened. Why did so many people leave all at once? No bodies were discovered. And you have to understand, it must have been something very threatening for a whole village of people to just leave. And these are native people, these are not tourists. So they're very familiar and they're comfortable and they know how to deal with the threats of known bear species, known predators. So no bodies were ever discovered. No evidence of the people at this village were ever discovered. However, these explorers, I would say maybe about 5 or 10 years ago, when they went to explore this village, they found some shocking evidence. And one of these pieces of evidence is a board. They basically found a board in the woods. It could have been a piece, maybe a piece of an old house or a boat. And this board had a bite mark in it, a bite mark. And when they took this boar to be examined by a zoologist, they said that this bite mark, whatever creature this was, most likely they said it was a bear, that the canine separation was about 5 inches. Okay. And now, when you compare that to a polar bear, the separation between the two canines of a polar bear is only around 3 inches. So, when they did a comparison as far as how large this beast would have been through its bite mark, they said it would have been 8 times the size of any known bear species in Alaska. So, definitely a thought provoking piece of evidence found in Alaska, too, as well. And also, another story in Alaska, the story goes is that a man was fishing in a boat within the same region of this island. Then, all of a sudden, as he was fishing, he kind of felt his boat kind of move back and forth, like something might have been swimming around it or something like that. Then all of a sudden, he kind of felt something just like kind of like smack the side of his boat. And he looked down and he saw a giant, what he described was a giant bear paw. So, definitely some fascinating accounts of a potential sighting of the supposedly prehistoric short faced bear. But definitely some interesting information and perspectives. You can never count out anything because we've only explored a very insignificant amount of the wilderness, especially in these desolate areas, such as the Canadian Arctic tundra and also even Alaska. And people have even reported seeing dinosaurs in Alaska too, as well. Okay. There is a possibility that these areas could be the new lost world. So, thank you so much for tuning in to the one and only Twilight Mysteries. Thank you.